The moment I walked into my birthday party, an unnerving silence descended. Conversations hung suspended in midair, champagne glasses seemed to freeze, and even the music appeared to fade into nothingness. Every single eye in that crowded living room was on me, drawn to the ugly, dark bruise blossoming beneath my left eye like a brewing storm cloud. My name is Margaret Price, and that night I turned 70 years old. What should have been a joyous celebration of family and love instead became the night I lost my son and, in a strange way, rediscovered myself. The magnificent chandelier above cast a golden shimmer across the polished mahogany floors of my Richmond, Virginia home. 40 years ago, my late husband Henry and I had meticulously chosen every detail of this house. It was meant to be a haven of warmth and laughter, but that night, all I felt was the biting chill of betrayal. At the center of the room stood my son, Andrew, tall and handsome in his custom-tailored navy suit, the same boy I had once cradled through fevers and mended heartbreaks. Beside him was his wife, Sabrina, her diamond earrings sparkling under the light, her hand possessively entwined in his arm. When someone near the buffet table gasped, whispering, "Oh my God, what happened to her face?" Andrew's voice cut through the murmurs, eerily calm, almost proud, and horrifyingly casual. "It was my wife who taught her a lesson," he said. So, she'd finally shut up and learn some respect. A stunned hush fell over the room. I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart in my ears. The humiliation burned through me, a pain far sharper than the throbbing in my cheek. For a moment, no one dared to move, not even Sabrina, whose expertly painted smile flickered like a candle about to be extinguished. Then, a voice sliced through the heavy silence. "What did you just say?" It was David, my younger brother, his hands clenched into fists, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. But this war, the one she had so callously started, wasn't over. Not yet. I should have stayed upstairs that night, hidden away in the sanctuary of my room, sheltered from the harsh glare of the truth. I should have concealed the ugly bruise beneath the dim light of my bedside lamp and pretended not to hear the forced laughter and music drifting up from below. But something inside me, something Henry had instilled in me years ago, a sense of unwavering strength and resilience, refused to let her win. It was my house, my birthday, my life, and I wasn't going to let fear steal that from me, too. So I went downstairs. The party was already in full swing. The living room gleamed under the soft glow of the chandeliers, filled with the clinking of wine glasses and the polite, superficial laughter of strangers. Then I stepped through the doorway, and everything stopped. The music faded mid-note, the conversations died mid-sentence, and for a long, breathless second, all anyone could see was the swelling bruise beneath my eye, dark and heavy against the pale expanse of my skin. It was a symbol of defiance, a silent scream against the injustice I had endured. Sabrina was the first to recover, her carefully constructed facade momentarily faltering, her smile flickering too quickly, too tightly before she looped her arm possessively through Andrew's. "Mom," she said in that syrupy tone I had come to despise, the voice she reserved for public performances. "You should be resting upstairs." I said nothing, refusing to engage with her charade. I simply walked past her, my back ramrod straight, my chin lifted in a gesture of unwavering defiance. Then someone, unable to contain their curiosity, whispered, "What happened to her?" And Andrew, my only son, the boy I had raised with unwavering love and laughter, the boy I thought I knew, answered calmly, almost proudly, as if he were reciting a prepared statement. "Are you proud of that, Andrew? Your father would be ashamed." Andrew's face paled visibly. Sabrina shifted uncomfortably, her grip tightening on his arm. "Don't twist his words," she said quickly, but a tremor betrayed her forced composure. The air in the room grew thick, a suffocating blend of shock and disbelief. And as I stood there, surrounded by the faces of people who had once filled my life with warmth, I realized a painful truth. This wasn't just a superficial bruise on my face. It was a visible mark of something far more profound, The moment I finally saw, with agonizing clarity, what my son had become. But before I recount how I ended up humiliated in front of everyone I loved, you need to understand the full story of how it all began. Because this story didn't start with that bruise. It began 3 years earlier, with love, loss, and an illusion of family that slowly, insidiously, turned to ash. 3 years before that silent, devastating night, my world had already crumbled once. When my husband, Henry Price, died suddenly of a heart attack, something deep inside me collapsed with him. He was my anchor, the calm after every storm, the constant, comforting laughter that filled every corner of our home. For 42 years, we had built a life that wasn't perfect, but it was ours, a tapestry woven with shared dreams and quiet joys. The morning he was gone, the house felt impossibly large and empty. The coffee pot brewed for 2 out of habit. His jacket still hung on the back of his chair, his reading glasses resting beside the newspaper he would never finish. That was the day the vibrant colors drained out of my world, leaving behind a muted landscape of grief. But then, my son Andrew came to me. He took my hand, his touch offering a fragile lifeline, and said, "You won't be alone, Mom. I'll stay for a while." I remember the unexpected warmth in his voice, the soft conviction that echoed so strongly of his father. It was my wife who taught her a lesson, he said, so she'd finally show some respect. The words hit me harder than her physical shove, a betrayal that cut me to the core. A collective gasp rippled through the room, a wave of shock and disbelief. Someone dropped a glass, the fragile crystal shattering against the hard tile floor, the sound echoing the shattering of my own illusions. My brother David stepped forward, his face a mask of barely controlled rage, his fists clenched at his sides. What kind of man lets his wife raise a hand to his mother and then brags about it? Andrew froze, his face contorted with a mixture of guilt and confusion. His lips parted, but no words came out, trapped in the tangled web of his own making. Sabrina tried to laugh, her voice brittle and unconvincing, the sound of a carefully constructed facade about to crumble. "Oh, come on, David. Don't be dramatic. It was an accident, a clumsy mishap." David snapped back, his voice laced with sarcasm. Was it an accident before or after she said she taught her a lesson? The air grew thick with tension, heavy with unspoken accusations, like a storm about to break. Sabrina's hand tightened convulsively around Andrew's arm, as if clinging to a lifeline. "You see," she said loudly, her voice shrill and desperate. "She's twisting everything, manipulating the situation to make me look bad." Defending myself from what? David shot back, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. Her existence? The murmurs turned into whispers, spreading through the room like wildfire. Faces shifted uneasily, a collective discomfort growing with each passing second. And then, as if summoned by fate itself, the front door opened, slicing through the tension. A calm, steady voice cut through the chaos, commanding attention. "Good evening, everyone," said Charles Bennett, Henry's longtime friend and the family attorney, his presence a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. It gave me a reason, a purpose, to keep moving forward. For a time, we found a new rhythm, a semblance of normalcy. We shared morning tea on the porch, reminisced about Henry's old projects, and watched Sunday movies together, just like before. We even laughed sometimes. I dared to believe that grief had somehow brought us closer, that in Henry's absence, I still held a piece of him through our son. Then one spring afternoon, Andrew came home with a woman. Her name was Sabrina Cole. She was elegant, strikingly beautiful, and effortlessly poised, as if she had stepped directly out of the pages of a glossy lifestyle magazine. Her smile was polished, almost professional, and somehow devoid of genuine warmth. "Mrs. Price," she said, embracing me with cool arms that never quite managed to convey any real affection. "It's such a privilege to finally meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary man." Her words were sweet as honey, but her eyes carefully studied me, assessing me like the stranger she secretly planned to outmaneuver. Over dinner, She complimented everything with practiced ease, the china, the food, the decor, but each remark carried a faint, almost imperceptible trace of subtle suggestion. "You have such timeless taste," she said, swirling her wine in the glass. "Though this house could definitely use a little modernization, something brighter, lighter, to bring in some new life, you know?" Andrew smiled at her as if she had uttered something profoundly insightful. I simply nodded, though something deep inside me twisted with unease. After that night, Sabrina became a regular presence, always charming, always helpful, and always full of ideas for improving the home that Henry had built with his own 2 hands. I told myself to be gracious and welcoming. Andrew clearly loved her, and love, I naively thought, could never be a threat. But I was profoundly wrong. In the months that followed, little things began to subtly shift and change. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I believe I have something that concerns everyone here." Sabrina straightened instantly, her carefully constructed mask snapping back into place, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Mr. Bennet, how nice to see you. We were just—" He raised a hand, silencing her with a simple gesture. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, his tone firm and unwavering. "There seems to be some confusion regarding the ownership of this property." Andrew frowned, his brow furrowed with confusion. "What confusion?" "My father left it to my mother, unconditionally. When she's gone, it passes to me. It's all perfectly straightforward." Charles opened his worn leather briefcase, his movements deliberate and precise, his tone even and professional. "Not exactly," he said, his words hanging in the air like a pronouncement. Before Henry passed, he filed an amendment to his will, a carefully considered legal safeguard. He wanted to ensure that his wife was never pressured, coerced, or forced to leave this home by anyone, family or otherwise. Sabrina laughed lightly, a forced, unnatural sound that betrayed her growing anxiety. "That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "Everyone knows the house is in her name. She's perfectly safe. No one would ever. We'd never." Andrew started to protest, but Charles continued, his voice unshakable, ignoring the interruptions. "The clause states, and I quote, 'If Margaret Price is ever coerced, manipulated, or harmed in an attempt to make her leave this property, the entire estate, including the house, all assets, and all accounts, shall be immediately forfeited by all heirs and irrevocably donated to the Virginia Elder Protection Fund.'" The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum of stunned disbelief. Then came the collective gasp, a wave of shock rippling through the room. Sabrina's face turned as pale as porcelain, her carefully applied makeup failing to conceal her growing terror. A new rug replaced the old, familiar one that Henry and I had painstakingly chosen together. Family photos mysteriously vanished from the hallway walls, replaced by generic abstract art in cold black and silver tones. The house, once filled with warmth and memories, started to echo with an unsettling emptiness. When I cautiously mentioned it to Andrew, he simply smiled dismissively and said, "Mom, she just wants to help. Please don't take it so personally." I told myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. I told myself that love could somehow coexist with discomfort. But deep down, something fundamental had shifted, something I couldn't quite name. Looking back now, I realized that was the very first time I felt like a guest in my own home. And I had absolutely no idea that was exactly what Sabrina intended. At first, the changes were so subtle, so seemingly innocuous, that I almost felt guilty for even noticing them. Sabrina started with small things. A few new throw cushions, some modern curtains, a rearranged living room layout that, she claimed, felt much more open and inviting. But soon, the changes grew bolder, more invasive. The floral drapes Henry and I had chosen with such care were gone, replaced by stark, minimalist blinds. The warm walnut table he had built by hand, a testament to his love and skill, was replaced by something sleek and sterile, all chrome and glass. The family portraits that had once lined the staircase, chronicling our shared history, were quietly removed. In their place hung abstract paintings in cold gray tones. They were devoid of any personal meaning, yet somehow perfectly reflected the hollow, expensive, and lifeless atmosphere that the house had become. When I timidly asked where the old photos were, Sabrina smiled sweetly, her eyes betraying nothing. "Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Price. I've stored them safely. Minimalism makes a space feel so much more peaceful." Peaceful. Andrew's hand dropped from hers as if he had been burned, his eyes wide with disbelief. Charles adjusted his glasses, his gaze unwavering. 3 weeks ago, someone requested an appraisal of this property under the alias Sabrina Cole. There was also an inquiry made about declaring Mrs. Price mentally unfit to manage her own assets, a blatant attempt to gain control of her estate. Both inquiries were traced to the same phone number, yours, Mrs. Cole. Sabrina's voice broke, her carefully constructed facade crumbling around her. "That's not true," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. "You're lying, fabricating evidence." Charles looked at her calmly, his expression betraying nothing. "The evidence is meticulously documented and officially recorded, Mrs. Cole. The appraisal forms, the phone records, the emails, all traced directly to your account. And there's also a recorded voicemail requesting the paperwork necessary to have Mrs. Price's cognitive competency evaluated, a clear indication of your intentions. Do you deny that's your voice?" Her mouth opened, then closed again, her carefully crafted lies catching in her throat. I don't remember," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "Maybe someone used my phone, accessed my account without my knowledge." Andrew's voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disbelief warring within him. "Sabrina, please tell me you didn't do this, that this isn't true." She turned to him, desperately reaching for his arm, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I did it for us, Andrew," she said, her tones suddenly soft and pleading, dripping with false sincerity. "You said yourself that this house was too much for your mother to handle, that she was struggling, that it was time for her to downsize. You said it should be ours. A fresh start for us to build our life together. I was only trying to make that happen, to secure our future." That was her favorite word, the one she used to justify every change, every erasure. But what she really meant, I realized, was silent. At first, I desperately tried to reason with myself. Maybe this was just her way of helping, of making the house her own. Maybe I was simply overreacting, clinging too tightly to the past. After all, she always insisted that it was for the good of the house, for the good of the family. But as the weeks passed, I couldn't shake the growing feeling that I was becoming an intruder in my own home. The comforting scent of my lavender candles was replaced by the sharp, artificial fragrance of her imported diffusers. The old quilt that Henry's mother had lovingly made, a tangible link to our past, vanished from the couch. Even my beloved teapot, the one Andrew had bought me for Christmas when he was just 13 years old, disappeared without a trace. When I inquired about it, Sabrina laughed softly, a dismissive sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, that chipped old thing? I thought it was just clutter. I donated it." That night, I locked myself in my room and wept. Not for the teapot itself, but for the slow, quiet erasing of my life, my memories, my very identity. Andrew, blinded by love or perhaps by something more insidious, didn't seem to notice any of it. Every evening when he came home from work, she was waiting for him, perfectly coiffed and dressed, with his favorite drink in hand, his dinner ready, and her flawlessly practiced smile firmly in place. When I tried, hesitantly, to tell him how I felt, he simply sighed, his eyes glazed over with impatience. "Mom, please. Sabrina's just trying to make this house feel like ours. Don't make her feel unwelcome." Ours. That word echoed through me like a spreading bruise beneath the skin, a constant, throbbing reminder of my displacement. I began spending more and more time upstairs, retreating to the only space that still felt truly like mine, my bedroom. Andrew stepped back, recoiling from her touch, as if she were contaminated. His face had gone completely pale, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. "I never said to hurt her, Sabrina. I never said to humiliate her, to make her feel like a prisoner in her own home." Sabrina's composure finally cracked, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. "You're pathetic, Andrew," she spat suddenly, her voice dripping with contempt. "You let that old woman control your life, your money, everything. She's not a victim, Andrew. She's a manipulator, a master of emotional blackmail." David's voice cut through the tension like a sharpened blade, silencing her with its unwavering force. "The only manipulator in this house is you, Sabrina." Sabrina turned on him, her eyes blazing with fury, her face contorted with rage. "You all act like she's some kind of saint, a selfless martyr. She's just a lonely old woman, afraid of being replaced, afraid of losing her grip on everything." Andrew's voice was quiet now, but it carried through the room like a thunderclap, silencing the chaos. "Replaced?" he said, shaking his head slowly, a look of profound sadness in his eyes. "You wanted to replace her, to erase her from our lives. You hit her, Sabrina. You physically assaulted my mother. You tried to steal her home, the legacy my father worked his entire life to build. You lied to everyone, including me. You tried to make me believe she was losing her mind, that she was no longer capable of caring for herself." Sabrina's tears came then, but they weren't tears of sorrow or remorse. They were tears of fury, the blinding rage of someone who had lost control, whose carefully constructed plan had been exposed for what it truly was. "You think she loves you, Andrew?" she screamed, her voice raw with emotion. "She'll die and leave you with nothing, disinherit you out of spite." Downstairs, laughter and music filled the evenings, the sounds of parties and gatherings with guests I didn't even know. I would often hear them whisper as I passed in the hallway, a ghostly presence in my own home. "She's still here." One night, I caught Sabrina looking at me from across the dining table. Her lips were curved in a polite, victorious smile, the kind of smile that told me she had already won something I didn't even know I was fighting for. And in that moment, the truth dawned on me with chilling clarity. Sabrina wasn't simply making herself at home. She was systematically taking it, piece by piece, one object, one memory, one boundary at a time. I just hadn't realized yet that I was already losing everything that Henry and I had so carefully built together. It started with whispers, those insidious seeds of doubt planted in the darkness. At first, I thought I was imagining things, that my anxieties were simply playing tricks on me. But late at night, through the thin walls of the house that Henry had built with his own hands, I could hear them. Andrew's voice, low and uncertain, and Sabrina's, smooth as silk, wrapping around him like smoke, subtly shaping his thoughts. "She's getting older," Sabrina murmured one night, her voice laced with calculated concern. "Wouldn't she be happier somewhere smaller? Maybe near other seniors, a place where she's cared for, where she doesn't have to worry about the upkeep of this huge house." Andrew's answer came after a long, uncomfortable pause, a silence that spoke volumes. "Sabrina, she's my mother. I can't just send her away." Her laugh was soft but sharp, a sound that sent a shiver of premonition down my spine. "Of course not, darling. You wouldn't send her anywhere. We'll just make it sound like it's for her own good." I sat on the other side of the wall, clutching my blanket, my breath catching in my throat. "No," Andrew said, his voice firm and unwavering for the first time in years, a sense of clarity and purpose replacing the confusion that had clouded his judgment for so long. "She already gave me everything, Sabrina. I just didn't see it until now." Charles closed the folder with a soft thud, his movements calm and deliberate. "Mrs. Price," he said, turning to me with a look of compassion, "you are fully protected by the law. Your husband, a wise and forward-thinking man, made absolutely certain that no one could ever take this home from you, not even your own family. If they try, the entire estate will be forfeited and donated to charity, ensuring that your wishes are respected and your legacy protected." David crossed his arms, glaring at Sabrina with undisguised contempt. "So, if she keeps pushing, if she continues with her manipulative schemes, she loses everything. Is that clear enough for you, Sabrina?" Sabrina's mask finally shattered completely, the last vestiges of her perfect poise and social charm dissolving into nothingness. In its place stood the real woman, stripped bare of her carefully constructed artifice, furious, cornered, and utterly exposed. She looked at Andrew one last time, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hatred and desperation, her voice dripping with venom. "You're choosing her over me, Andrew? After everything I've done for you?" Andrew's answer was soft but final, a pronouncement that sealed her fate. "No, Sabrina, I'm choosing what's right, what's just. I'm choosing my mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for me." For a heartbeat, no one moved, the silence broken only by the sound of ragged breathing. Then Sabrina turned, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, and stormed out of the room, her departure a dramatic exit worthy of a stage actress. For the first time, I realized that Sabrina didn't just dislike me. She was actively planning something that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. And worse, she was slowly, subtly, turning my own son into her unwitting accomplice. The next morning, she greeted me with her usual practice charm, her smile as bright and artificial as the morning sun. "Good morning, Mrs. Price. I was thinking maybe we could look at some lovely senior communities together. They're so modern and well-equipped now. You'd have activities, company, and no more household chores." I stared at her, my mind reeling, trying to process the audacity of her suggestion. "You mean leave my home?" She laughed lightly, brushing a stray strand of hair back from her perfectly sculpted face. "Oh, not leave. Transition. You deserve comfort at your age, Mrs. Price. Less to worry about, more time to relax." I said nothing, but my hands trembled slightly as I poured my tea, the silence thick with unspoken accusations. That house wasn't just walls and furniture, bricks and mortar. It was Henry's laughter, our shared memories, our entire life together, inextricably woven into the very fabric of the place. But Sabrina didn't see that. To her, it was just square footage and market value, an obstacle to be cleared away in her relentless pursuit of control. In the weeks that followed, little things began to change again. Not objects this time, but rules, subtle yet insidious restrictions on my freedom and autonomy. A list appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, on the refrigerator door. No using the washer after 7 p.m. Avoid strong-smelling foods. Knock before entering the living room. Each line felt like another wall closing in, slowly suffocating me within my own home. Andrew saw it, too. I knew he did, but he didn't stop her, didn't intervene. When I finally asked him about it, he just said softly, his eyes pleading for understanding, "Mom, it's temporary." The front door slammed shut with a resounding thud, the sound echoing through every corner of the house, a final, definitive punctuation mark on the end of their relationship. And just like that, she was gone, banished from our lives. The room remained silent, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Andrew stood there, shoulders slumped, his face pale with shame and regret, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "Mom," he whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't know how I let this happen, how I allowed myself to be so blinded by her lies. I thought I was protecting her, helping her achieve her dreams, but in reality, I was destroying you, betraying the woman who gave me everything." I wanted to reach out to him, to offer forgiveness, to mend the broken bond between us, but the hurt ran too deep, the betrayal too profound. "You didn't just destroy me, Andrew," I said softly, my voice trembling with emotion. "You destroyed what we had, the foundation of trust and love that we had built together over so many years." David put a comforting hand on my shoulder, his presence a source of strength and support. "Helen needs peace now," he said firmly, his eyes conveying his unwavering resolve. "She needs time to heal, to process everything that's happened. Let her breathe, Andrew. You should stay somewhere else for a while, give her some space." Andrew nodded, his face pale with shame and remorse. "I understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "I deserve that, at least." He looked at me once more, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for forgiveness. "I can't lose you, too, Mom. Please don't shut me out completely." My voice trembled, but I held my ground, refusing to offer easy absolution. You already did, Andrew, but maybe, just maybe, one day, in the distant future, we'll find our way back to each other. When he walked out that night, the sound of the door closing behind him didn't break me, didn't send me spiraling into despair. Sabrina just likes order, a sense of structure. Please try to understand. I did understand, but not in the way he meant. Sabrina wasn't simply bringing order. She was methodically establishing control, stripping me of my independence and dignity, one small restriction at a time. Then, one afternoon, as I was tidying up the study, I noticed a document left carelessly on the printer tray. It was a property appraisal request, containing my address, my name, but the contact information listed was Sabrina Coles. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The document explicitly requested an evaluation in preparation for a potential sale. That night, I confronted Andrew, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. He looked shocked, feigning surprise, but not entirely surprised, as if he had known about it all along. "It's just paperwork, Mom," he said quickly, his eyes darting away from mine. "Sabrina's just helping with finances, looking into options." She thought what? I asked quietly, my voice dangerously calm. That I'd die soon, that this house would just conveniently fall into her lap. His silence was answer enough, a damning confirmation of my worst fears. I went to bed that night carrying a weight I had never felt before, a crushing burden that settled deep in my soul. It wasn't just grief, not just anger, but something colder, something far more unsettling. It was the chilling realization that the person I trusted most in the world was slowly disappearing, being swallowed whole by someone who saw my home, my memories, and my love as mere obstacles to be cleared away in her relentless pursuit of her own selfish desires. And deep down, I knew what was coming next. Because when greed moves in, love invariably moves out, leaving behind a desolate landscape of betrayal and regret. 2 days before my 70th birthday, the house felt unnaturally still, a suffocating calm before the storm. It freed me, releasing me from the suffocating weight of his betrayal and his wife's insidious influence. For the first time in a long while, the house was still, and though it was filled with silence, it was finally my silence, mine alone, a space for healing and self-discovery. After the door closed behind Andrew that night, I stood alone in the quiet, the stillness amplifying the absence of his presence. No laughter, no perfume, no footsteps echoing down the hall was filled with an utter silence, not the painful kind, but a stillness that settled like calm water after a long, turbulent storm. For the first time in years, I felt I could truly breathe. The bruise on my face faded over the next few days, but a dull ache lingered deep in my chest. David stayed with me for a while, faithfully making tea each morning and preparing dinner every night, always insisting that I rest. He gently told me it was time I stopped dedicating myself to caring for everyone else and started nurturing myself. For once, I actually listened to that advice. The house began to feel different, lighter, somehow. Sabrina's gaudy, expensive candles were gone, replaced by a subtle fragrance. The air once again carried the scent of roses, Henry's favorite flower. I retrieved the family photos from the storage room and carefully rehung them along the staircase, arranging them just as they had been before Sabrina had coldly removed them. Each picture felt like reclaiming a small but vital piece of my lost self. But grief, as it often does, still cast shadows, even as the light began to return. There were moments when I'd hear a car pull into the driveway and my heart would twist with a sudden, painful hope, thinking it was Andrew finally coming home to apologize. But days turned into weeks, and he didn't come, until one evening, the phone rang. "Mom," Andrew's voice was unsteady, trembling with emotion. "Please don't hang up. I need to tell you something. It's important." Andrew had left early for work, and Sabrina was supposedly out shopping for the party she had insisted on hosting to honor me, a celebration that felt more like a carefully orchestrated performance than a genuine expression of love. But her car was still parked in the driveway, glinting under the morning sun. Something didn't sit right, a nagging feeling that I couldn't shake. I climbed the stairs quietly, my knees aching with each step, and stopped outside the door to my bedroom, the one place in the house she hadn't yet dared to claim, or so I thought. Inside, sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and glinting off something metallic in Sabrina's hands. She was standing by my dresser, holding my jewelry box, the small oak chest that Henry had lovingly carved himself for our 25th wedding anniversary. Inside were not just gold and pearls, but memories, tangible links to a lifetime of shared love and experiences. The brooch from our honeymoon in Savannah, the delicate pearl necklace Henry had given me on the day Andrew was born. Each piece held a story, a whisper of the past. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling, betraying the fear that gripped my heart. She turned slowly, deliberately, not startled, not guilty, just annoyed, as if I had interrupted her doing something entirely reasonable, something she was perfectly entitled to do. "Oh, just looking," she said lightly, her tone dismissive. "These pieces must be worth something. You should really think about selling a few. We could put the money toward the kitchen renovation, give it a much-needed facelift." My throat tightened, constricting my ability to speak. "You have absolutely no right to touch my things." Sabrina tilted her head, her eyes narrowed, smiling that thin, sharp smile that I had come to dread, the smile that always preceded some act of subtle cruelty. "Relax, Margaret. I wasn't stealing." I remained silent, my fingers growing cold as they gripped the receiver. "I hired a private investigator," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "I needed to uncover the truth about who Sabrina really was." My breath caught in my throat, a wave of anxiety washing over me. "She's done this before," he continued, his voice thick with a mixture of shame and anger. "Twice. Both times targeting older men with significant property. She married them, systematically drained their bank accounts, and left as soon as the money was gone. She's deeply in debt, Mom. Tens of thousands of dollars. She never truly loved me. All she wanted was what Dad built for you." I closed my eyes, tears silently streaming down my face. It wasn't just the betrayal that wounded me so deeply. It was knowing the extent to which she had broken him, my son. "Andrew," I whispered, my voice filled with compassion, "you can't undo what's happened, but you can choose the kind of man you'll become from this point forward." He didn't speak for a long moment, the silence stretching taut between us. Then, quietly, he said, "I'm going to fix this, Mom. I'm starting therapy. I need to understand why I allowed this to happen to me. I'll call you again when I'm ready." And he did. Weeks slowly turned into months. He called often, his voice initially awkward and hesitant, but gradually growing more confident and at ease. We spoke about Henry, about his work, about small, everyday things that felt like the tentative beginnings of something whole and real again. He shared details of his therapy sessions, explaining how his counselor had described Sabrina's actions as gaslighting, emphasizing that it wasn't just simple manipulation but a calculated form of psychological conditioning designed to make him doubt his own judgment and perceptions. He said, "She made me believe that love meant unquestioning obedience." I responded gently, "That's not love, Andrew. That's control, plain and simple. But really, you have to admit this place needs a serious upgrade. It's so old-fashioned, so outdated." "This house doesn't need your touch," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, summoning every ounce of courage I possessed. Something in her expression changed then, a subtle shift that revealed the cold, calculating woman beneath the veneer of charm and sophistication. The sweetness drained away, replaced by something harder, colder, and infinitely more menacing. "You keep saying your house, your things, your room," she said, stepping closer to me, her voice laced with venom. "But it's not really yours, is it? It's ours now. Andrew's name will be on everything soon. You should start getting used to it." Her words sliced through me like shards of glass, each syllable a deliberate act of cruelty. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, the air thick with unspoken threats. "This home was built by my husband," I said, trembling, my voice barely a whisper. "He left it to me, not you. You will never take that from me." Her smile cracked then, revealing the ugliness beneath. What came next was fast, too fast, a blur of movement that I couldn't fully process. She moved closer, invading my personal space, her perfume sharp and suffocating, a weapon in her arsenal. "You're a bitter old woman," she hissed, her voice dripping with contempt, clinging to ghosts. "Andrew doesn't need you anymore. I'm his family now." I felt her hand shove against my shoulder, a seemingly insignificant gesture, but I wasn't expecting it, and it threw me off balance. My hips slammed hard against the edge of the dresser, sending a jolt of pain down my side. I stumbled backward, desperately trying to regain my footing, but it was too late. The sharp edge of the nightstand caught me squarely across the face. White light exploded behind my eyes, momentarily blinding me. I hit the floor hard, the impact jarring every bone in my body. For a moment, everything blurred, the room spinning around me. Little by little, my son began to return to me. Not the naive, trusting boy I had lost, but a stronger, more resilient man, learning how to stand on his own 2 feet again. 2 years later, the house that had once felt like a desolate battlefield was filled with the sound of laughter once more. I had new neighbors, kind, welcoming people who brought over homemade peach pies and freshly baked bread. I joined a book club at the community center, eager to connect with others. I even started tending Henry's garden again, the same garden Sabrina had once dismissed as hopelessly old-fashioned. One warm spring afternoon, Andrew came to visit. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a beautiful bouquet of tulips, the very same vibrant color Henry used to plant every April. He looked noticeably older, but also calmer, his eyes no longer carrying that haunted, hollow look. "I wanted to introduce you to someone," he said with a hint of nervousness. A woman stepped forward. She had soft brown hair, warm, kind eyes, and wore simple, unpretentious clothes that spoke of quiet confidence. "Mrs. Price," she said, extending her hand to shake mine. "I'm Emily Rhodes. It's such an honor to finally meet you. Andrew talks about you all the time." Her voice was steady and genuine, filled with warmth and sincerity, completely devoid of pretense or artificial polish. I liked her instantly. We had lunch together on the porch, bathed in the gentle sunlight. Emily asked about Henry's garden, about the history of the old house, and about my secrets for keeping the roses blooming so beautifully year after year. Not once did she inquire about money, inheritance, or property. She simply listened, smiling, genuinely interested in everything I had to say. After they left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive and vibrant once more. A few months later, Andrew called again, his voice trembling, not from fear this time, but from a different, softer emotion. I could taste blood, the metallic tang coating my tongue, and feel the hot, stinging pain blossoming beneath my eye. Sabrina stared down at me for one heartbeat too long, her eyes cold and devoid of any remorse. Then she said coldly, her voice devoid of any emotion, "You tripped. You're old. Remember that." She turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click, the latch snapping shut like a final verdict. I sat there on the carpet, shaking, the ornate jewelry box still glinting where it had fallen, its contents scattered around me like fallen jewels. My reflection in the dresser mirror was barely recognizable, not because of the bruise, though that was certainly shocking, but because I saw something I hadn't seen in years, something that had been buried deep beneath layers of grief and disappointment. Rage. Not the kind of rage that burns hot and uncontrolled, but the kind that freezes you from the inside out. It clarifies, it focuses, it empowers. And in that frozen stillness, I made a promise to myself. She might think she had won, that she had broken me beyond repair. "Mom," he said, "I asked Emily to marry me." He paused, then added, "But before we start making any plans, she asked me for something, a prenuptial agreement. She said she doesn't want a single penny that isn't rightfully hers." Tears welled up in my eyes before I could even respond. "You have my blessing, son," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "All I've ever wanted was for you to find someone who values love above ownership and material possessions." The wedding was small and beautiful, held in a quiet, secluded garden near the river where Henry and I used to walk hand in hand. During the vows, Andrew's voice cracked with emotion as he said, "I've learned that love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. And family without honesty isn't family. It's a cage." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my porch beneath the vast Virginia sky. The air was filled with the sweet scent of jasmine, and the moon hung high above the trees, just as it had on the night Henry had proposed to me. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet stillness. "You were right, Henry. You built this house to protect us, and it did, even after you were gone. Because sometimes strength isn't loud or angry. Sometimes it's simply about standing firm, quietly, until the truth finally speaks for you." And as the gentle wind rustled through the leaves of the rose bushes, I realized something else. Revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's simply about surviving with your dignity intact and finding peace in your heart. And peace, I've learned, is the most beautiful revenge there is.